This is BBC News. I'm Martine Croxall. The headlines at 11. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has told his party's conference in Liverpool that it should prepare for a general election.
So I ask each and every one of you to accept the decision of the members, end the trench warfare and work together to take on the Tories.
Dutch investigators accuse Russia of supplying the missile that shot down a passenger plane over Ukraine 2 years ago. The Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, wins a High Court fight with junior doctors in England over a new contract.
And on Newsnight, coming shortly, we have footage from inside a hospital in the besieged Syrian city of Aleppo. We'll see doctors doing their desperate best for children and in the most dire of circumstances.
Good evening and welcome to BBC News. Jeremy Corbyn has told the Labour conference that socialism for the 21st century will be the foundation of the party's programme, as he urged delegates to be prepared for a possible general election as early as next year. He urged colleagues to end what he called the trench warfare of the past year and set out a series of policy pledges, including nationalising the railways and defeating Conservative plans for more grammar schools. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg listened to the speech in Liverpool.
The leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
Coming out on top, in charge of his party. So what happens now? There's no change in the devotion of his followers. But this is his offer to you.
Thank you. It's the socialism of the 21st century. Our job is now to win over the unconvinced of our vision. No one will be convinced of a vision promoted by a divided party. We all agree on that. So I ask each and every one of you to accept the decision of the members, end the trench warfare and work together to take on the Tories.
To suits at the front, supporters at the back, he made his 10 familiar promises, coming to a leaflet near you.
For full employment, a homes guarantee, security at work, a strong public national health service and social care, a national education service for all.
Vows too on climate change, public services, inequality and peace. His articles of faith.
Don't worry, conference, they're not the 10 commandments. I haven't come down from the mountain with them.
There was no bold offer to colleagues who didn't support him. He needs them if Labour can convincingly make this attack.
This isn't a new government. It's David Cameron's government repackaged with progressive slogans but with a new, harsh, right-wing edge. Who seriously believes that the Tories could ever stand up to the privileged few? They are the party of the privileged few. Their only plan is the return of grammar schools, segregation and second-class schooling for the majority. Labour is standing up for education for all.
There'd be a bigger tax on business to pay for education. But despite the referendum result, on anxieties over immigration, his aims to ease the strains, not cut the numbers.
A Labour government will not offer false promises on immigration, as the Tories have done. We will not sow division by fanning the flames of fear. We will act decisively to end the undercutting of workers' pay and conditions through the exploitation of migrant labour and agency working. Labour will reinstate the Migrant Impact Fund and give extra support to areas of high migration.
He was confident, but in his comfort zone. And 10 years after Tony Blair made his last conference speech, Mr Corbyn was applauded for opposition to Iraq.
I believe it was right to apologise on behalf of the party for the Iraq war. Right to say that we learned the lessons.
He had stern words on anti-Semitism and abuse. and urged the party to forget their private battles and focus on the public.
We are 500,000 of us, and there will be many more, working together to make our country the place it could be. Conference, united, we can shape the future and build a fairer Britain in a peaceful world. Thank you.
A grand sounding vision for socialism for the 21st century. But it was more Jeremy Corbyn's greatest hits, a broad outline of his long-held beliefs, than a detailed argument to persuade you to vote Labour at the next election.
Do you think the public is ready for 21st century socialism?
Do you know what? They're ready for it, they need it. And I think it's our job now to explain to them how this system is leaving them behind.
And I'm very pleased that we've got 21st century socialism. I'm absolutely delighted.
Very well received in the audience. I think it goes down well in the country as well.
The people's flag is deepest red.
Jeremy Corbyn's supporters believe his Labour is much more than a cover version of the party of old. But echoes of the past are all around. He's inspired thousands on the left, but is yet to show that millions will join his chorus. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Liverpool.
Sam Allardyce says he won't rule out a return to football, despite admitting an error of judgment which ended his career as England football manager after just one match in charge. He had been secretly filmed by reporters offering advice on how to bypass the rules on player transfers. He said he'd been the victim of entrapment. Our sports editor Dan Rowan's report contains flashing images.
Many said Sam Allardyce came with baggage when he was appointed England manager. And today, bags packed, he left home humiliated for a holiday he hadn't been planning, stopping to talk for the first time about the undercover newspaper sting that cost him his dream job.
On reflection, it was a silly thing to do, but just to let everybody know, I sort of helped out what was somebody I've known for 30 years, and unfortunately it was an error in judgment on my behalf, and I paid the consequences. But you know, entrapment has won on this occasion, and I have to accept that.
I would have thought £100,000 a time.
Allardyce became England's shortest serving ever manager after the Daily Telegraph secretly filmed him securing an in principle £400,000 deal with journalists who were posing as businessmen. The dim view of his words about avoiding transfer regulations and his disparaging remarks about predecessor Roy Hodgson. With their credibility as the moral guardians of the game on the line, Allardyce's bosses deemed his £3 million a year position untenable.
English football is a bit of a laughing stock, I'm sure, around the world. It's very, very embarrassing for all concerned. Not a nice situation to be in. Got to move on, got to get results in the next 3 or 4 games.
The barely believable events of the last 48 hours have left the FA reeling here at Wembley. Allardyce's departure raising serious questions over their judgment in appointing him, but also their ability to govern a globalised game that's changing beyond recognition, with unprecedented amounts of money and greed, disparate ownership and ever more powerful clubs and agents. And the crisis is getting worse. The Daily Telegraph has today alleged that 8 current or former Premier League managers have received bungs for player transfers. Their latest film shows an agent saying he knew an ex-manager that had more backhanders than Wimbledon. Even the body that represents agents has now admitted the system is broken. One former FA chairman had this to say.
If you looked at the sort of figures that are going out to agents, they are gigantic now. And at some stage, someone has to say, hang on, this is all money going out of football. This has nothing to do with football.
With the threat of more damaging headlines to come, today the government expressed its concern, demanding a full investigation, a warning to the FA that this is now about confidence in the way the game is run, and not just one manager's spectacular fall from grace. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Wembley.
An investigation led by Dutch experts has concluded that the missile that shot down a Malaysian airliner over eastern Ukraine in 2014 was from Russia. All 298 people on board MH17 died. Most of the passengers were from the Netherlands. The Russian government has dismissed the investigation as politically motivated. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott has been studying the findings.
Caught in the crossfire of someone else's war, in busy skies that were meant to be safe. Nearly 300 people were on flight MH17, 80 of them children. It was brought down by a Russian-built Buk missile. Both sides in the war have them. Now criminal investigators say they're closing in on those responsible.
On the 17th of July, flight MH17 was shot down by a Buk missile fired from farmland in Pervomaisky, and the system was brought in from the Russian Federation territory and then returned to the Russian Federation afterwards.
This recreation from investigators suggests the missile launcher crossed over the Russian border on the morning MH17 was shot down. Here's a tapped mobile phone call from 9:22 a.m. An officer tells his commander it crossed the line. Now, the line he's talking about is the Russian border. There's no attempt to hide the launcher, which is sat on the back of a Volvo truck. Lots of people took pictures and films. They put them on social media. Here, it's parked up in a lay-by in the city of Donetsk. The final destination was a farmer's field near the town of Pervomaisky, which was controlled by Russian-backed separatists. Now, firing left these scorch marks on the ground, and locals took pictures of the smoke trail. It's then filmed heading back to Russia. Crucially, one of its missiles is now missing. President Putin's top spokesman has reiterated to the BBC that Russia had nothing to do with it.
We've been ruling out, and I've been ruling out, the fact that any Russian weapons were shipped to Ukraine, any Russian army members, any Russian troops were inside Ukraine, and we're still ruling out that possibility.
Bryce Fredericks and his girlfriend Daisy were on board MH17, heading for a dream holiday in Bali.
It's a big step towards the truth, a big step. We're not there yet. Of course, we want to know exactly who, names and why, especially why.
Investigators say they're down to 100 suspects for who fired the missile. Even if they do eventually name names, it's by no means certain that whoever did this will face a court of law. Richard Westcott, BBC News.
Junior doctors have lost a legal challenge to stop controversial new contracts in England. A group called Justice for Health had argued the new terms and conditions were unsafe and unsustainable, and the government didn't have the right to push them through. The Department of Health has welcomed the High Court ruling and called on junior doctors to move on. The most senior lawyer at the child abuse inquiry for England and Wales, Ben Emmerson, has been suspended. A spokeswoman for the inquiry said they had recently become very concerned about aspects of his leadership and an investigation would be carried out. Mr Emerson said he was unable to comment. Well, let's speak to our Home Affairs correspondent, Tom Simons. And Tom, the inquiry has issued a statement. What do they say?
Well, it's a very short two-line statement that says, as you point out, that there are concerns about aspects of his management of his team of counsel. He is a senior barrister who works on the inquiry, working with other barristers who look at the investigations that the inquiry is carrying out, about 13 of them. And the allegations that have been made against him are more than one, we are told. And the inquiry has said that it will now be carrying out an investigation. And interestingly, the statement that's been released tonight denies some press reports that were around yesterday and again today that actually Ben Emmerson QC was due to resign from the inquiry because of concerns he had about its future direction and something of a disagreement with the current chair, who's just taken over, Professor Alexis Jay, a senior former social worker. So the inquiry is saying he's not resigning, he's not raised any concerns with us about the future form of the inquiry, and it's also saying that it is now investigating him following these complaints that have been received. And it says that's about, just to reiterate, aspects of his management of his group of counsel that he leads in this huge £100 million public inquiry.
Tom, thank you very much. Tom Simons. Now it's time for Newsnight with Evan Davies.
Words can no longer capture the reality of life in Aleppo, but pictures can. We'll bring you recent footage of doctors doing their best to help children in the most desperate conditions. It is difficult viewing, but no one watching the pictures coming out of the city can say they were never told of the horror therein. We'll ask this rescue worker in Aleppo why children appear to be the worst hit. Also tonight...
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
We send Newsnight's man of the people, Chris Cook, on the road to see how Corbyn is playing in the bellwether constituencies.
So, would this make you more likely to vote for them?
Yeah, now that I've listened to him properly. So, because, like, with Tony Blair, I only voted him because I never liked the bloke anyway, but it was the better of the options.
Our previous Newsnight man of the people is here to put the case for. Tony Blair's former speechwriter may disagree. And we relive the era of prog rock, just in case you were missing it.
A huge, what seemed like a worldwide revolution about changing the way the world is, looking for a better place. I know it's all bullshit, but you know, the age of Aquarius was on our doorstep as well.
Hello. The words to describe the plight of the city of Aleppo ran out some time ago. However, with the help of doctors there, we can show you recent footage from the city. The background is that the rebel-held eastern part of the city is under siege and is victim to a sustained assault by the Syrian government. Terror has been rained upon the residents for days, surpassing some of the extremes of brutality seen in the civil war. Well, today, 2 hospitals were struck, and it is inside a hospital that we're now going to see. Many would say that if what you're about to view is not classed as a war crime, then it should be. John Sweeney has been looking through the footage, and obviously, I should warn you, it is distressing.
Imagine if your local hospital looked like this. No water, no time to clean up the blood, and where the living lie cheek by jowl with the dead. This is Aleppo under siege in an underground hospital. The war in Syria gets more pitiless by the day. The bombing of Aleppo is relentless. Early this morning, blast from a bomb caused concrete to fall on the hospital's intensive care unit and knocked out its oxygen generator. On Sunday, cluster bombs, some with Russian manufacturers' marks, blasted free Aleppo. The hospital had 180 patients, 10 of whom died. On Monday, 27 patients died, amongst them 7 children. We can't check those numbers, but these images are not make-believe. This is brain surgery carried out on the floor because all the other beds in intensive care have been taken.
عمره 5 سنوات في صباح هذا اليوم قامت الطائرات بقصف المكان الذي يقطنه في حي بايدين بالقنابل العنقودية.
When a cluster bomb explodes, it fires out ball bearings in all directions. One ended up here, according to this X-ray, in this little boy's spine.
جت طيارة ضربتكم؟ إيش أصابك؟ إيش أصابك عمو؟
A second came through the back of this boy's head to end up behind his nose. A third landed in this patient's liver.
This fragment here in the porta heparis, actually we are trying to extract it without injuring the elements of porta heparis. Oh my gosh. This is the fragment here, actually. This is from a cluster bomb.
So what are we looking at here? Mustafa Hamo works for BBC Arabic and comes from Aleppo. He watched the footage we've been sent. What's it like being a patient inside this hospital?
You have very slim chance to survive. Because the number of casualties and injuries is so huge, they cannot cope with it. They leave the injuries and the casualties on the floor, and they have to take care of the people who have the better chance to make it. That's the only way they can cope with it. And don't forget, they are under constant bombardment.
Some of the images I've been sent from Aleppo just cannot be shown. The next picture is of, I think, a child, and it's a mess of blood and concrete. The head may be decapitated. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen, and it's unbroadcastable. But there's a problem with that. We are not showing you the full horror of this war.
I want you to take an incision.
The news from the hospital is not all bleak. 2 weeks ago, Newsnight broadcast a world-first operation. Using Skype, surgeon David Knott in London directed his colleagues in Aleppo how to build a new jaw for this man. Now he can talk.
Come on.
Tonight, the life of this patient and the children with ball bearings in their bodies are in the hands of the doctors of Free Aleppo.
That report compiled by John Sweeney. Well, early this evening we got an internet video phone line through to Aleppo, and I spoke to Ismail Al-Abdullah, who is with the White Helmets. It's a Syrian volunteer rescue group. I began by asking him whether most of the victims in Aleppo are children or adults.
The most victims are in Aleppo City are children.
And why is that?
Why is that? Because if you were a father and you are now in Aleppo City, if you have a kids, you will not leave the kids, leave your house, and you make them stay in your house. And when the airstrike targeted your house, eventually the kids will be under the rubble and we will be injured, because we don't have any schools, anything. The people make their kids to stay home, and now they make them sleep more to consume less food. Actually, and this is why most of the kids are the victims in Aleppo City.
Ismail, you have been to the hospitals that were damaged today. Can you just tell us what you saw when you visited those facilities?
Actually, it's a big damage there and destruction, and the nurse died because of the bombing. And the hospital, it's not the first time this hospital was targeted. Just 3 days ago was targeted directly, actually. And everyone who gets injured, first thing that say, okay, do not take me to the hospital. The hospital is a dangerous place, actually. A dangerous place more than any place.
The doctors who are working in those hospitals, they're real heroes.
All what we have, just a few doctors in all Aleppo City. They are moving from hospital to another hospital. They stay in this hospital 5 hours, then they go to the other hospital to stay another shift. And everyone who works in the hospitals now are heroes, actually, because they are risking their lives, and they know in any moment they can be killed because of the bombing.
Now, outside the hospitals, what is the situation in eastern Aleppo, quite apart from the damaged medical facilities?
Targeted in the bakery today, and many people were gathering in the morning to get bread for their kids, for their families, and they were targeted by the airstrike, then mortars, and many people died in that massacre. And this is again, it's not the first time they use it, and they targeted the bakeries.
Did we just hear? What did we just hear? We heard an explosion.
Actually, we heard an explosion. A warplane was in, and it's still in our sky, and fired the first rocket, and we are waiting to the other one.
Do you ever think we should give in? We should let Assad take this place over because the siege will come to an end?
No, because most of the people who are staying in Aleppo City now, they stayed because they want to stay. When the road was open, they didn't go. They stayed to defend, to say no to the bombing, If the situation gets worse, I don't know, maybe will we say something else, but up till now, people in Aleppo City are holding.
Ismail Al Abdullah, thank you very much. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on to other things. In Liverpool, it was Jeremy Corbyn's big day, his second conference speech as leader, an hour long. It was undoubtedly, considerably more confidently delivered than some of his others. More cleverly populist in its themes. I thought more aspiration, optimism and sunny socialist upland than you sometimes get. And a number of specific ideas in there too. Perhaps a bit lacking in humour. But let's hear what our political editor thinks. Nick Watt is with me. What did you think, Nick?
Well, this was Jeremy Corbyn's best speech on a national stage. His aides are joking that he's been learning on the job, but a year into the job and after that challenge, this was the most fluent and polished performance that we've seen from Jeremy Corbyn. Now, there were some messages for his critics who say, look, you're only interested in forming and leading a protest group. And he said, protest and campaigning is at the heart of the Labour movement, but the most important thing it does is it seeks to win power at a national and local level to improve people's lives. Now, he did have messages for his supporters. He did say that it was right for him to apologise on behalf of the Labour Party for the Iraq War. And we did hear on 4 occasions the